Welcome back, my friends, to the second video of the 7-video series reviewing the Blazing Heart and the Daily Bread. I'm actually very excited about doing this video because I get to go over the crux of, the foundations of the system. In my past, it's been, critical for me to have an understanding of why things work the way that they work and what the spirit of them actually is. There's a big difference between understanding things at a procedural level. Okay, I do this and I do this and I do this and I do this, and the results, you can still get them, but the results are profoundly different when, in addition to the procedural understanding of what you're doing, you have that spiritual understanding of what's the spirit of it, why does it work, how does it work, what is it that I need to be able to see as a result of the work that I'm doing. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to go over the Blazing Heart, if you want to say, on a spiritual level, just so that you have an understanding of what you're looking for as a result at the end of it, and what exactly we're pushing against to get the most potential and prosperity and purpose that we possibly can out of our lives. And to kind of simplify this, the key to an exceptionally fruitful and fulfilling life is the rejection of our flesh's appetite for pacification, detachment, and hypnotic behavior. Along with our commitment to our spiritual conditioning through hyper-purposefulness, hyper-clarity, and hyper-intentionality. I really can't emphasize enough, active and intentional presence is a critical element of forming and facilitating the life that you were designed to live. And more times than not, it is the rejection of active and intentional presence that gets in the way of fulfilling your potential prosperity and purpose. So to gain a better understanding of why, here is a rudimentary explanation of what drives, basically our actions. All right, so I'm going to bring up a whiteboard here real quick. I am not an artist, so please, if you can, refrain from judging me too much with this. But at the bottom here, as far as what dictates the type of life that we're having, you have your decisions, you have your behaviors, and you have your actions. Now, this is in no particular order, because interestingly enough, I've seen a lot of people who've been anywhere on the spectrum of this. I've seen people who are very deliberate with their actions. I've seen people who are not deliberate with their actions but have a behavior. They just basically have a default behavior that they have. And I've seen some people who rely on decisions in order to dictate actions, but I've seen other people who make decisions and take no action at all. And so in order to simplify, this, I guess, this entire concept, I'm just going to say that all three of these things are even, depending on the type of person that you are and the type of history that you have. All right. So, these three items right here are at the crux of who we are as human beings. The decisions we make, the behaviors we have, the actions we take, those are the things that really deliver the type of life that we want. And there's just so much that goes into what these turn out to be that, again, it's critical for people to understand exactly what it is that drives those. All right. So this is what I like to help everybody with. Again, this is very rudimentary, not only in the drawing, but in the understanding of this. But you just need to kind of think of, the human mind, all right, as this dome, right? It's this created dome that we have protecting us from the rest of the world. Because if you look at the rest of the world, there's millions upon millions of stimuli that we're dealing with on a regular basis, all right? And that stimuli comes in all kinds of forms. It comes through all five senses, and really, if you want to talk about the sixth sense, it even comes through a sixth sense with some other people, but everything, we see and we hear and we taste and we touch and we smell, that's just bombarding us at all times. And, to I guess, to simplify this, the human mind is lazy. It cannot possibly, and does not want to possibly take in all this information at the same time. And so what it does is it, basically creates a preferred stimuli that gets past this dome. So you have all these millions, and it says, all right, well, this is what's important to me. Just these couple things here. All right. And as a result of that, we're actually seeing the world in this prism view, in everything that we end up doing. And when you look at the world in the prism view, and that dictates your, your decisions, behaviors, and your actions. What really is being said here is that whatever decisions you made about your life and about your world prior to what's happening right now is what dictates everything afterwards. And that's a pretty powerful thing if you think about it, because that means that your ability to change your life and the ability to change what's happening, in your daily life, your ultimate life, as far as your how you interact with the world, your purpose, and everything else, is absolutely dependent on your ability to be intentional with this dome. To give you an illustration of that, the more often, we're in a common situation, the more often that we rely on this dome to survive. For example, when was the last time if you're in your office, you're very familiar with it. When was the last time you felt the chair that you're sitting in? When was the last time that you try to take in all the smells? And, especially if there's no difference in the smell of your room, obviously there's a different smell there, you notice it. But I'm talking about the common smells, the things that are there all the time. When's the last time you took notice of that? Another example that a lot of people use is when they make a purchase. What happens is quite often, if they're getting ready to buy a new car, or they're getting ready to buy something else as far as some type of addition to their home, they will start noticing more and more homes like that, or noticing more and more cars that fit the decision they made, because basically the mind's saying, hey, this is appreciated stimuli. This is something that's important to me. And so when it comes to understanding this, this barrier, this dome here, it's critical to understand what goes into creating it. And what goes into creating it's pretty simple. It's our beliefs, it's our attitudes, and our values. So think of it that way. What happens is our beliefs, let's go to that, attitudes, and our values. This is what's created that dome that prevents the entire world from coming in there. That is why, if you had any type of, personal excellence training or exposure, they quite often talk about your beliefs. They quite often talk about your values. They quite often talk about your attitudes towards things, because these are the things that create that dome. So what's unfortunate is a lot of times, like our beliefs, they aren't always formed by us. They're formed by our different experiences. They're formed by our histories. They're formed by our culture and everything else. Our attitudes, the same way. A lot of times, those things are not formed by us. These are things that, unfortunately, we allow the world to dictate. And again, our values are, fall into that same thing. These are things that, at times, most people sacrifice to other people to dictate. And so what ends up happening is, the definition of ourselves. So I'm going to define here. Define. Again, I'm not an artist. Just bear with me, please. Basically, what's happened is how we have defined ourselves is what dictates what our beliefs, our attitudes, and values are. And this is the foundation of everything that we do. If we define ourselves as inept, if we define ourselves as incapable, if we define ourselves as a victim, if we define, whatever label you want to put on there, however we define ourselves are the things that are going to feed into the beliefs, attitudes, and our values. And as a result, it's going to dictate our decisions, our behaviors, and our actions. The most unfortunate part of humanity, I think the most destructive thing in humanity, and especially when it comes to the Christian community, is that we have allowed the world and even our own personal experiences to define us, to define what we're capable of, what we're not capable of, to define what is real, what isn't real. We have given up that right to the world. And as a result of that, in essence, we have given up that right to a greater entity that just really does not have our best interest in mind. Generally speaking, the world. cares more about itself than it does about us. And as a result of that, by sacrificing, what we are to the world, we are given our right, our God-given right, to them. And so in order to understand what we're trying to accomplish with the Blazing Heart, you have to understand that we are taking back this definition of who we are. And we're giving it back to where it should have gone in the first place, which is with our Creator. Because if we have been intentionally designed with all these different skill sets and opportunities and everything else, okay, because I fully believe, and we'll be going over beliefs later on, but scripturally, we are told that we were intentionally designed for a purpose, that we're a part of this larger body, that we're given these specific talents, that we're given these specific opportunities, for the greater good of the world. And God is just feeding all of these great people into this world, who some choose to tap into their potential and their gifts and their opportunities, while others intentionally choose not to. And so the idea of the Blazing Heart is to get back into that, that spiritual part of what we were created to be in the first place, and to allow God to redefine us the way that He intended, so that we're able to facilitate this, this great creation that He made and gave to the world. All right. So going back to the Blazing Heart real quick, the actual PowerPoint of it. Here we go. So what we have here is we have, three elements of the Blazing Heart. We have our purpose, which is up here. We have our beliefs, which are right to the bottom right. And I don't know if you guys can see my arrow or not, so I'm just going to mention where they are. And you have the environment. And, it's very interesting. The reason why I call this the Blazing Heart is because it has been modeled off of the three elements of fire. All right. So anybody that's been a Boy Scout or Girl Scout, or has actually been in, in a public service, as far as, fires or what else, first responders and otherwise, they have an understanding that fire cannot exist without three elements. First you need your heat or your spark. All right. And then in addition to that, you need your fuel. Okay. And then you also need oxygen and air for it to breathe. And if you were to put together a fire, if all three were not present, there would be no fire. Just think of it this way. A forest right now has an abundance of fuel because of the trees. And generally speaking, a forest has an abundance of air, but there's no fire. Why? Because there is no spark. There is no heat. Now, when it comes to the fuel, we can have a spark. We can have heat. For example, you can have a match available to you, right? You've got that spark there. And then you can have the open air, but your fuel is extremely limited. And once that match is lit, and basically the wood that's been used for that match, once it's used up, the flame goes out. And finally, when it comes to the oxygen, again, everyone's seen this, the most common way that, people get rid of a fire or put out a fire is through the compromising of its oxygen. You put a cap on it, and that restricts its oxygen. Or you use a CO2 extinguisher, which CO2, if you didn't know already, is actually a gas that's heavier than oxygen. So what it does is it pushes the oxygen up, and then the fire ends up starving. All right. So it's regardless of the abundance of the three elements, if one of them are in short supply or scarce or not in supply at all, a fire cannot exist. Well, the same thing is true when it comes to our spiritual development, and it comes to basically how we form our identity and define ourselves. All right. We need to have, this purpose, this spark, this heat. And this comes from the Creator ourselves. I mean, I can't emphasize enough the amazing properties of intentional design. We have an inclination, we have a hunger for certain things in our lives. We have a natural skill set, a natural ability that comes as a part of our lives. And it is quite profound and quite amazing that, as individuals, there's just so much of a difference in each one of us. For example, I am a father of 10 right now, and I say right now because, a year ago or almost 2 years ago, I only had 9. So, I don't know what it's going to be, a couple years from now. I'm very blessed, and my wife is just an amazing woman. So right now I am a father of 10. And I will tell you that all of my children, obviously they've only had one father and one mother, and they've all grown up in the same house. But somehow each one of them have major differences in what their abilities are and what their likes are and what feeds them and what gets them excited and what they can do and everything else. Each one of 10 different children have that. And there's just no other explanation for it because they have the same parents. They live in the same place. This is something that is given to them. And so when it comes to our purpose, and it comes to the things that, we've specifically equipped and tooled and being provided these opportunities to do, it's, this is something that we want to make sure that we know. It's something that we want to make sure comes in abundance, because that can make a very strong flame as far as our impact in our spiritual fulfillment. Moving on, you go to, the wood part, the fuel part, which is our beliefs. We can have this profound purpose, and this is very intentional, specific purpose. But if unfortunately we have not been intentional about our beliefs, and worse, we've allowed a world that does not have our best interests dictate what our beliefs are, then what happens is our fuel to fulfill that purpose is in short supply. And it retards our flame. It really holds back the true impact of what our flame can be. And so the more intentional we are with those beliefs, and you see there are a couple beliefs there where we're going to go over those later on. But, with the more potent those beliefs are, and the more intentional those beliefs are, and the more they align, with the flame that we're trying to create, the better. And it's really, again, it's an amazing thing when those two things align. But again, with this being the blazing heart, with this being a fire, you can have an abundance of purpose and intentionality in your life. And you can have this abundance of beliefs that support that purpose. But if you are missing your air, which is your environment, it's the places that we live and the places that we work and everything else. If we are not in an environment that supports both of those things, our flame will choke. And so it's equally as important to make sure that the environment that we're in allows for the growth of that flame. And again, we'll go over this in a bit, but it's specific things that need to be encompassed in our lives need to always be with the understanding that a choked flame cannot grow. All right. So with this understanding of the blazing heart now, I believe that you guys have an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, why we're trying to accomplish it, what we're going to look at. The next videos, we're going to go over purpose and how to develop it. We're going to go over beliefs, how to develop those. We're going to go over environment, and then we're going to flip it over and actually go over, the daily bread as far as the ritual every day that you're going to do. But the last thought I want to leave with you is this, is that, there are 3 parts of us as human beings. There is, our flesh, which most people are familiar with. There's our soul, and there's our spirit. And we were created to be spiritual beings. And before the fall of man, the flesh didn't have the power that it does. I mean, the knowledge of good and evil and all the things that we, had incorporated in our lives, didn't exist prior to the fall of man. And so you have to realize that, in essence, we are spiritual beings, and we're always intended to be. And it's only through adopting our spirituality again that we're able to really fulfill our purpose and the things that we are capable of doing. And that's what we're doing here. By you defining yourself intentionally and by going back to the spirit and no longer relying on the worst part of humanity, which is the flesh. Because all the flesh does is it's about scarcity. All the flesh is about just making it. It's not about thriving. It is about surviving. And we've got to get past surviving when it comes to our ultimate talents and purpose. If we are able, to strengthen the spiritual part, and again, make Christ at the center of it, there is truly no thing that we're incapable of doing. And that's pretty exciting thing for most people, because even if we have a minority of people who are able to tap into their spiritual potential and their spiritual purpose, and really, I would even say their spiritual prosperity as far as the utilization of their gifts. The world's just going to be such a better place. All right. So really, do your best to have an understanding of why we're trying to do the Blazing Heart. If you only have one of these elements or two of these elements, and you're not doing the third one, the flame will not thrive. It's about all three to really change your life. So my friends, listen, I appreciate you, watching this next video, or the second video here. And I'm very, very excited about, what's to come as a result of the full facilitation and integration of this into your lives. God bless.